Hello everybody, this is my grandma on my dad's side. Her name is Ruth Gibson, and she's a very nice person. You are currently how old?
I will be 86 November the 23rd this year.
Okay, now let's get started about your life story. So, where were you born?
I was born in Elkins, West Virginia in 1924.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was about 6 years old, my parents moved to Washington, D.C. So actually I was raised and educated in Washington, D.C.
That was during the Great Depression, wasn't it?
Yes, yes.
What was that like?
Well, I was very young, but I can still remember that they had soup lines where you could drive down in the city, and you would see block after block of men, women, and children standing to get a bowl of soup.
Oh wow!
People didn't have jobs, and I guess Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you ever listen to any of his fireside chats, or were you still too young?
Oh yes, I listened to a lot of his fireside chats, even as a child, because people loved him so much that when he would do a fireside chat, of course we didn't have television in those days, we had radio, and you would, we had a upright that would sit on the floor, and it was tall.
Mm-hmm.
And we would sit on the floor in a circle, and our parents naturally would sit in chairs. And we would listen to him give his fireside chat.
That was pretty interesting.
And he finally created a lot of jobs for people. One project was what they call the CCs. It was forestry, and they would plant trees and cut down trees and clear and make parks, and then they had another project which they called the WPA, was a work project administration, I guess, and that was they did roads and railroads. And then after the I was trying to think when the war started. Yeah, World War II started, and of course that brought us mainly out of the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And every young man that was, well, actually we used to say if your body was warm, the army would take you because they needed you. And of course, up until that point, we didn't even have we had an army, but it was a very, very small army because we didn't have any need for it. We had a decent navy, but we didn't have a good army, and they didn't. When the war started, the soldiers didn't have guns to practice with. They made wooden guns and pretended they were rifles.
How old were you when the war started?
Well, I was born in, the war started, I think, in 39. So how old would I have been? I was born in 24. I remember it. I remember when Pearl Harbor was bombed, because my older brother was in the Army at that time, and he was stationed at Schofield Barracks in Honolulu when they bombed the barracks, but thank God he came out alive.
Oh, your brother was in Pearl Harbor?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
I'd heard a lot about Pearl Harbor, but I didn't know it was so close to home for you.
Oh, yes.
But it scared your family real bad.
Well, yeah, because, you know, we didn't have communication like we have now, and you just had to kind of wait and listen to the news, and then you didn't really know much of anything.
And wouldn't they have, like, the lists at town hall of all the people confirmed dead and alive? And
Well, yeah, but I wasn't, you know, old enough to understand all that.
I don't know.
But anyhow, do you have any more questions about
Not so much about the Depression. I kind of wanted to move on to another subject, but and this is actually a good place to lead into it. Grandpa, bless him, he was in the Navy, right?
Correct.
How old were you when you met him?
I was 20.
Mm-hmm.
21. I was 21.
And that was old by those day standards, right?
Yes, yes. In fact, my family they begin to worry about me because if you were 21 and not married in those days, you were considered an old maid or getting close to it. Because most of the girls back then, they even married as young as 12, 13.
Oh, no.
In fact, though, I think a lot of states probably still have that law on the books, I believe.
I know Alabama
might be one of them.
And Grandpa was from Texas.
Yes, he was born in a little town in southwest Texas, a little town called Gonzales, which is about, probably 75, 80 miles east of Houston. And he was born on a ranch. And during the Depression, the reason he went in the Navy was during the Depression, a single man couldn't get a job because if there was a job came up, they would always give it to the married men, which they should have. So he couldn't get a decent job, so he went down to Houston to the Navy recruiter and joined the Navy.
And he was actively in service when you met him?
Oh, yes, yes. He had had several years in the service when I met him.
How long was it before you ended up marrying him?
We knew each other probably about 4 months, 4 or 5 months.
Only 4 or 5?
Yes. And he was getting ready. His ship was getting ready to go out. They had sent him to D.C. He was a gunnery officer, and they sent him to D.C. to the Navy gunnery school there, and that's where I met him.
Oh, okay.
In D.C. And they back then, as soon as they finished school, they shipped him back out because they needed him out at sea. So he was going to leave, so we decided to get married. And my parents and all my relatives said it wouldn't last. But we were married 57 years.
Yeah, I remember Grandpa. He was real cool.
Yeah, he was a good person.
Whenever he proposed to you, did he have a ring or anything, or was it just?
Oh yes, he had a ring. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we went down and I helped pick it out. We didn't have a lot of time. He was assigned to a destroyer, and he was going back to the Pacific to kill some Japanese.
One of those kamikaze bombers?
Oh yes, his ship was bombed a couple of times with kamikazes.
Did he ever write to you?
All the time. And send flowers and...
Oh, sweet of him, even from the war?
Pardon?
Even from the war?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
they took good care of this, especially the Navy. They could, if your ship didn't get blown up, you were pretty safe.
Well, he was on one of the really big ships, wasn't he?
Oh yeah. Mainly though, he was on destroyers.
Well, after the war, what did you guys settle down and do?
Well, after the war, he still had a couple more years. Let's see, the war was over in 1945, and he didn't get out of the Navy until 1956. So we had a couple of duty stations. One duty station was, they sent us to Houston, Texas, and he was a Navy recruiter there for 2 years.
Okay.
And then we were sent to Maryland to the Naval Air Station, and that was our last duty station. And he retired at Patuxent Naval Air Station. And when we retired, we, of course, my folks lived in, at that time they had moved down to D.C. because my dad had retired. He had worked for the Naval Research Laboratories. And when he retired, he moved across the river into Virginia. And so we settled a little town called Vienna, Virginia, which is basically a suburb of D.C. And we bought a little house, and that was in 1956, and in 1958 our first child was born.
And that was Aunt Karen, right?
That was your Aunt Karen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then 4 years later, I had a little boy.
And that was Uncle Mike.
That was your Uncle Mike. And then 4 years later, I had another little boy, and that was your dad. And then that was it.
No more kids after that?
No more. Didn't want no more.
Well, we're almost out of time, but just one more question. Can you tell me all the places that you've traveled around to and been and lived?
Well, honey, I can tell you where I haven't lived easier than I can tell you where I have lived.
Well, then let me ask you this then. What was your favorite?
I think San Diego.
You like San Diego?
Yes, because the weather is good there. It's year-round. It's about 75 degrees. You don't get that much rain, though, because it is part of the desert. A lot of canyons. But it's a nice place to live. It's a nice Navy town.
Well, thank you very much for letting me interview you, Grandma.
Well, you're welcome, sweetheart. I enjoyed it.
Again, thank you so much, and that's